Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oaten, and for almost a decade, I have been a transformation coach and therapist. This podcast is all about lifting the veil of consciousness and awakening to the truth. It is also about helping you to raise the bar in all areas of your life and relationships by starting with you. If you're ready to take back your personal power and reclaim your life, you have come to the right place. I'm so glad that you're here, so let's get started with today's episode. In this episode, we're diving further into an Instagram post that I put up a few days prior to recording this that really blew up. And at this point, we have over 200 comments underneath when I asked women to share which of the 5 slides I'm going to go over the points with you. I asked them which ones resonated most, and the women in the comments were sharing. If you are listening to this around the time of the live publishing, you can go to my Instagram account and check it out. It's in one of the 3 pinned posts on the top of my feed, and it says, it's titled True Narcissistic Abuse Has Very Distinct and Consistent Patterns. I find that there's just so much white noise out there on social media about narcissistic abuse and red flags and focusing on their behaviors. And there's just 1,000,001 things that could point toward narcissistic behavior. Like so many things, but then also might not as well. So this is where women get stuck. And I just, and as well, on top of that is there's this big piece around this that nobody understands completely what it's like to live in that and live with that and experience that and what it does to you and how it destroys your trust in people, that you assume everyone has an ulterior motive, that everyone has a negative intention, or they're just using you, or don't want what's best for you, or that they're secretly wanting to hurt you. Like, you go around every corner, that's how you feel because you've experienced something so wrong from someone that's supposed to love you and look out for you. And so it can make things really challenging on the other side, as well as trusting someone new in a newer relationship on the other side. It really can mess you up. And so just as I've been doing a lot more diving into the impacts of recovery and getting on the other side and entering new relationships, dating, that sort of thing, is the plethora of information out there on red flags. Like, they can be as simple as like someone that doesn't have a lot of friends, or someone that seeks validation or is looking for positive feedback, or even controlling behaviors. So all of those things are usually pointing toward a toxic or abusive or narcissistic person. However, when I look at all of those things for myself, and I don't identify with being narcissistic, I don't ever want to be the cause of hurting someone's feelings. I look at my own stuff, even if it's uncomfortable. I'm willing to grow. I'm always actively growing to be better, so I don't hurt people that I care about, even if it's inadvertently and unintentionally or unconsciously. But we all have some narcissism. It's a spectrum. It's a disorder when it's on the higher end and the behavior becomes harmful to others and causes the person to be unable to connect authentically with others, and they use certain behaviors to control and manipulate to get what they want. So we can all do that though, right? We can all do those things. So this is where it gets really murky, because you'll hear things like, oh, that's just all men, or, oh, maybe you can make it work, or hopefully you can make it work. And when I was speaking with a client about this a while back, she said something so profound, and she said, would those people be saying that to women if they had a black eye, or they could clearly see they're being physically beaten? And because you don't understand the depth of damage that living in this every day with someone actually does to your mental health, to the way you see things, the way you see the world, you won't understand it. So someone that's just looking for validation, or maybe they have a little bit of low self-worth or low self-esteem, or they're just needing that reassurance. Sometimes I need that. Sometimes validation, well, I think a lot of times validation makes everyone feel good, right? So I just feel like a lot of the stuff out there isn't helpful when it comes to identifying narcissistic abuse, and it's not about identifying their traits. I find that to be the least helpful thing because, as I said, we can all have traits, we can all have tendencies, we can all have narcissistic moments, I call them, those moments where like it's all about me and what about me and what about all the things I've done instead of focusing on the other person. Like we can all have some of those traits. Where it becomes a problem, as I said, is when it's higher on the other end of the spectrum and the behaviors create chaos, dysfunction, lots of conflict, lots of pain for you, the one on the receiving end, lots of feeling disconnected, unloved, uncared for, unheard, like you don't matter. And everything just always feels so difficult when you're trying to deal with someone like this. So what I did in this post is I tried to boil it down to patterns that are across the board in, I would say 99% of the time when you're dealing with a true narcissistic person, someone that has high level of traits, or perhaps the full-blown personality disorder, but we don't even need to label it. But I guess where I'm coming from is having experienced it, I feel like there are just certain things that are across the board going to be happening as a pattern. They're consistent, they're ongoing, they're always there, and nothing ever changes. So let's dive into these. The first one is that they'll never take ownership and 100% responsibility for their actions, words, or behavior. Somehow you'll always feel like it's your fault or that you took it wrong or too sensitive and can't take a joke. That is almost always across the board what's happening. It doesn't matter what happens, how you perceive it, it's always that you took it wrong or that you're overreacting or that's not how they meant it, they just meant it this way. They'll make some kind of snide remark or offhanded comment or criticize you in some backhanded way. And when you call them on it, it's always you took it wrong and they were joking, they didn't mean it that way. That is just unacceptable behavior, right? It's one thing to say something and then, realize maybe what you said and how it might have come across and own it and understand why it might have come across that way. It's a whole other thing to put it on you that it's your perception that's wrong or that you took it wrong or that you always take everything wrong, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, and on it goes. That is almost always. I don't think I've ever spoken to or worked with a woman in one of these relationships where that was not present. So that's how I was able to boil these down. I was thinking, what are the distinct patterns that I myself know to be true from my own lived experience that is also backed up by a consistent affirmation in that or confirmation in that through the work I've done with women over the past 5 years who are in these relationships. So this is where I was able to come up with these 5, and they obviously resonated with a lot of you because at this point there's over 2,600 likes, and as I said, 200 comments that are confirming that you're resonating with these. And then the second one is that every time you try to share your feelings or express something you want or need, it turns into an argument. Oftentimes, it's the simplest things that become the biggest arguments. And this is where it could be something as simple as, hey, can you clean up your frying pan that you use to make eggs? Or could you clean out the bathroom sink that you left a mess from shaving? Or could you, do this or that? Or could you help me clean this up? Or whatever it might be. It could be just the simplest thing. And it turns into an argument. And you're left thinking, did I make a mistake even asking? Like, should I just not ask? Should I not ask for help or ask them to do things that they should be doing anyways? It just becomes this constant battle that even the simplest requests or you sharing your feelings, it never goes well. You will find yourself in confusion really quickly, getting defensive. Things can get heated quite quickly because of the tactics that they're using, and then you can start to lose your cool, and then your reactions and tone and anger becomes the focal point when originally you brought up something calmly. that is about what they did or didn't do or a request. That is almost like I always say almost always because I'm sure there are exceptions where maybe this isn't the case, but this is almost always a consistent ongoing issue. Like these things are like daily. You're going to be experiencing these on some level, right? It's not like occasionally you bring up something and your partner gets defensive and then you're able to still resolve it calmly and you feel like it's been repaired. No, this is like, it leaves you feeling like nothing ever gets resolved, ever. No resolution. You keep spinning the stories in your head because there has been no resolution. It's like what I talk about all the time. It's like the closing of loops. Our mind wants to close loops, right? So when you have things that are left undone, like tasks, I'm notorious for this. My brain will go around and around and around until I've completed those loops, and it causes a lot of stress and it causes a lot of distraction. So this can happen when there are things happening in your relationship that don't make any sense or that feel like there's been no resolution, or you've talked about it and it still keeps happening, or it's a confusing interaction where you're wondering like, what the fuck just happened here, right? When I just brought up like the simplest request. Number 3 is gaslighting. This again is always present in these relationships. There is, and I'm not saying, and this is the thing too, is like, doesn't mean that someone on occasion might inadvertently gaslight you by saying, oh, I was just kidding. But if that's happening all the time and there are always things coming at you, comments coming at you, things happening, and you're being told that it's you that's the issue, that your perception is wrong, that everything is your fault, that you're actually just too sensitive or reading too much into things all the time, doesn't mean you can't on occasion. This is where it gets a little murky, right? Is like, on occasion, could you be reading something wrong that you have a trigger around and did take offense to it? Maybe. But that doesn't matter, because someone that cares about you will go, that's not how I meant it. I can see how it might have landed that way. I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings. That was hurtful. Like, to validate that, okay, what was said, it wasn't meant that way, but I can see where you're coming from. Not you're too sensitive, or you're just looking for a fight, or you're reading too much into things. You're always overthinking everything. You're always making a mountain out of a molehill, like big deals out of nothing, always trying to see the worst in me. Like, can't you see that I'm trying, and can't you give me the benefit of the doubt? That is happening all the time, like daily again. So this again is a consistent ongoing pattern where you feel like your reality is always in question. And so you feel like you're going crazy. You feel like you're losing your mind because you're trying to make sense out of something that makes no sense, and you can't do it. Your brain is not wired that way, so that's why it doesn't make sense. If you try to understand why someone with a disordered way of operating in the world is thinking, it's not going to work if you don't think that way, right? That's why all of these types, a lot of you will say, like, is there a textbook out there? Because they all say and do the same things. It's something to do with a disorder. It's a way that the brain is developed, whether it's hereditary, runs in a family, if it's nature versus nurture, the upbringing, experiences, whatever. We don't need to even go into that. But it obviously is something that's very wonky, we'll say, because I don't know about you, but if I've ever tried to think about what makes somebody act the way that I've seen and I've witnessed, I can't make any sense of it, because it's like, that's not how a logical person works. Like, that's not how a normal human being would respond. Why is one request turning into a big argument when if it was requested of me, it would just be like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Like, or I can't do it right now, I'll do it later. But it's like, you're not going to go around, hopefully, saying awful things to someone and criticizing them and cutting them down and making them feel like shit. And then if they say something to you, going, oh my God, like, you just always have a problem, right? Like, that's not how we operate. I know I don't. And I can't understand why somebody would want to hurt someone like that and then double whammy it with making them think that they're losing their minds, that they took it wrong. So number 3 is gaslighting. Number 4 is your experience is that you will have anxiety typically, your throat closing up, heart racing, racing thoughts, replaying of confusing interactions, trying to figure out what went so wrong in the conversation that you just tried to have. So this is a really big one that I want to really, really drive home, is that when you're dealing with someone that your body knows is not safe for you psychologically, emotionally, maybe even physically, you will have a visceral body reaction when you're around them, when you are trying to have a discussion with them. And that doesn't just go away, right? Like, you could be trying to have a normal conversation, and before you know it, you can feel your blood pressure rising, you can feel your heart rate racing, you can feel the stress response being activated when the abusive stuff starts happening, when the manipulation stuff starts happening. So how to know that someone is fucking with you is to pay attention to what your body is doing. Are you confused? Are you like, what the hell is happening here? Are you getting anxious? Is your throat closing up? Like, that doesn't mean that with a healthier person, maybe you won't have some of that, especially if you've been programmed to fear bringing up your feelings. But just generally, like, do you feel when you're having the conversation, like you're losing your mind, like you're losing your grip? You can feel anger rising. You can feel like you really lose track of the original point. It's hard to, it's so hard to put into words. You could go on and on and on for an hour about something that could have been resolved in 1 minute of just conscious, calm communication. But it turns into an hour long of bullshit. And then you're left with having to deal with that cortisol surge and the anxiety and the heart racing. Is so bad for our hormonal system, ladies. Like, messes everything up. Your thyroid, your adrenals, your progesterone balance. It causes weight gain and rapid aging and stomach issues and migraines, and you'll have all these weird lab results that don't make any sense. You'll just look haggard all the time and just feel haggard and gross, like, because the stress, it slowly takes your life away. It takes years off your life, I'm convinced. So paying attention to what's going on in your body, in your mind, when you're having these interactions. And then when you leave the interaction, how do you feel? Are you like, what the hell just happened there? Like, nothing even got resolved. I don't feel like I was even heard what I had to say. So that is a huge, huge, very clear indicator of narcissistic abuse. And then number 5 is that you feel like you're losing your mind. And it's only tied to this one person and relationship. Other relationships or situations don't elicit the same feelings. Others see you as a stable, articulate, smart, and high-functioning person. But yet in this relationship, because you're experiencing all of this different stuff, you feel like there's something wrong with you. Like, you go to a psychiatrist and get medication because you think something's wrong, or you are feeling like you have some kind of mental instability going on. And you very well might, but it is a result of what's going on in your relationship. Because for sure, it's going to cause some kind of dis-ease and misalignment in your body when you're constantly feeling like you have to be on guard, hyper-vigilant, you can't speak your mind, you're being treated in ways that are not acceptable to you, but you feel like there's nothing you can do about it. That puts you in the trauma response, because trauma is triggered when we feel powerless, trapped, like there's nothing we can do about a situation that is harming us. That's what causes the trauma. When that's going on over time, that has a huge impact on your mental health and your physical health. So those are the 5 things that are always present. I will say, maybe there are some exceptions, but what I saw in the comments was most women identified with all of them, if not like 3 or 4 of them. So that will probably be you as well. And just as a recap, so the first is that they'll never take ownership and they'll never take responsibility for themselves or their actions, words, or behavior. Somehow it's always your fault, or that you took it wrong, are too sensitive, and can't take a joke. Every time you try to share your feelings or express something you want or need, it turns into an argument. Oftentimes, it's the simplest things that become the biggest arguments. Number 3 is gaslighting. You feel like your reality is always in question, that everything is your fault, your perceptions are always wrong, and that you actually are just too sensitive or reading too much into things. Number 4 is you're experiencing anxiety, heart racing, racing thoughts, replaying of confusing interactions, trying to figure out what went so wrong in the conversation that you tried to have. And number 5, you feel like you're losing your mind, and it's only tied to this one person or relationship. Other relationships or situations don't elicit the same feelings. Others see you as a stable, articulate, smart, and high-functioning person. So whether you identify with all of them or not, these are clear signs. Again, as a pattern of behavior, you can look at it overall that this is what has been happening. And you can stand in that reality that even if there's certain traits that maybe you're reading out there that don't fit, ignore it. This right here, if this is going on, you can stop the search and know this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm living. There doesn't need to be any question. A relationship should not feel like this. Like a healthy relationship should not feel like a constant struggle or leave you feeling like you are losing your mind. So I hope that helps you if you are in any way feeling confusion around what you're experiencing. Every woman in this type of relationship experiences this confusion and self-doubt. It's part of the dynamic. It's part of the cycle. It's part of the manipulation. And until you can stop questioning yourself and living in denial about that, you will stay stuck in it. You have to be able to just say, you know what, I have enough information to know that this is really fucked up and it fits in alignment with what I'm experiencing. And it's being taught by someone who has lived it and has worked with many women who have lived it, to be able to say that these 5 things, if you're experiencing them, or even just a few of them consistently, and it's having an impact on your well-being, your ability to function, your physical health, your mental health, your feeling of mental stability, it's a problem. And it's only going to get worse. It will not get better. It will not change. Those quick turnarounds to try and change are another aspect of this, right? A quick turnaround of like, oh, okay, I've seen the light, and they change for a little while only to go back. That's another very big indicator, because they can't change. You know, like if they were to able to really see, that would make them have to look at some really ugly stuff. And because of the nature of the disorder, they don't want to do that. They're doing every possible thing they can to not do that. That's why sometimes they can make a quick change in behavior, but they go right back into the old way of, or the default, right? The default is to be behaving in these ways, to deflect and blame shift and gaslight and create confusion and chaos to take the focus off of themselves. So I hope this helps you to stop wondering what you are experiencing and gives you some clarity on making some new moves to get out of the harmful situation. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Awakening Women podcast. If you love this show and it has served you and helped you on your journey, please take a moment right now and leave a rating and review in iTunes and Spotify. If you'd like more daily content, videos, and inspiration, come on over and join me at Awakening Women Support Official over on Instagram, where we can connect and you can continue your transformation and growth journey. And I'll see you online.